My name's Grant Holloway. I'm 32, living in a quiet little house just outside of town. I work as a field technician for a decent-sized local outfit. Nothing glamorous, but it's honest work and it pays the bills. Mortgage is halfway paid off, I've got a reliable old truck, and I live a pretty low-key life. I'm not rich, not broke, just comfortably in the middle. Relationships? Sure, I've had a few, but nothing ever really stuck. Maybe I'm not the easiest person to get close to, or maybe I just haven't met someone who fits. Either way, I've stopped chasing. These days, I enjoy my peace, tinkering with home projects, spinning old records, and keeping things simple. This story started on a Friday. Just another workday. I arrived at the office early, like I always do. I hate feeling rushed. Grabbed a cup of bitter coffee from the break room machine and sat in my usual corner, back left table by the window. We had our regular weekly meeting coming up, led by our CEO, Evelyn Rhodes. She runs the company with precision. Smart, composed, doesn't waste time. You can feel the room shift when she walks in. She came in at 9:01, sharp as ever, gray pantsuit, hair tied back, heels clicking against the tile. "Morning," she said, placing her phone face down on the table. We all muttered a reply, and she went straight into updates, deadlines, schedules, the usual reports and check-ins. I was halfway through jotting notes when she said, "Before we wrap up, anyone free tonight? I need help with a couple of things at home. Just mounting some shelves and moving a TV. I'll pay, of course." Everyone glanced around. Silence. Nobody wanted to volunteer, but no one wanted to look unwilling either. I waited a few seconds, then raised my hand. "I can help, if it's not too late," I offered. She looked at me just a beat longer than normal and gave a small nod. "Perfect. After 6? "Sure," I replied. The meeting wrapped. People filed out. Nobody said a word about it, not even a joke, which was rare. Evelyn wasn't exactly known for blending work and personal life. The day rolled on, calls, updates, a quiet lunch at my desk. I clocked out around 5:30, grabbed my toolbox, and headed over. Her place was 10 minutes away, tucked into a quiet, upper-middle-class neighborhood. Clean and quiet, but not flashy. I pulled into her driveway at 6:07. Sat in the truck for a moment longer than necessary, not because I was nervous, just curious. You don't expect your boss to ask you for help at home. I grabbed my tools and knocked. She answered, and it took me a second to process. Gone was the boardroom image. Instead, she wore soft gray joggers and an oversized sweatshirt. Hair down, no makeup. Just real. "Hey," she said. "Thanks for coming." "No problem," I replied. Her home was tidy, minimalist. Books on shelves, a solid coffee maker on the counter, a big TV leaning against the wall. "The shelves are in the living room," she said. "I've already marked where I want them. I've got to catch up on work, so I'll be nearby." She settled in with a quiet cooking show playing. We didn't talk much, just short exchanges about placement or stud alignment. She offered me a drink. I asked for water. "Most people ask for beer," she said, half smiling. "I'm driving," I replied. She gave me a small grin in return. I finished everything in about an hour and a half. As I packed up, she walked in holding a white envelope. "Here," she said, offering it. I looked at it, then at her. "No need." I didn't mind helping. "You sure?" she asked, a little surprised. "Really?" I nodded. She paused for a moment, then asked casually, "Got plans this weekend?" I blinked. "What?" "This weekend," she repeated. "You doing anything?" "Not really. Just the usual chores, some downtime." She tilted her head slightly. "Wanna hang out?" "Nothing fancy. Just company. I get bored on weekends." She said it plainly. Not flirty, not awkward, just honest. "Yeah," I said after a beat. "Sure. Why not?" She smiled. "Cool. Saturday, late morning? Sounds good." And that was it. I left. Sat on my couch for 10 minutes wondering what that had been all about. Saturday came with gray skies and a quiet only small towns get. I woke up early, habit, maybe. Or maybe because I kept thinking about her invite. Was it just being polite? Was she lonely? Or was it something more? By 10:15 I was ready, clean shirt, fresh shave, a little more effort than usual. I pulled into her driveway at 10:30 sharp. She opened the door barefoot, in black leggings and a loose navy hoodie. Her hair was pulled back, and she smiled like she'd been waiting. Messy, but still beautiful. That's how she looked in that moment, so different from the polished executive I'd worked under for years. "You're right on time," she said with a soft smile. "Come in. I just made coffee." The scent hit me as soon as I stepped inside, rich, strong roast. Way better than the watered-down stuff we had at the office. Her house was quiet, no music, no distractions. Just the hum of the fridge and a few birds outside. She handed me a mug and walked toward the back patio. I followed. The yard was simple but tidy, a grill, a couple of chairs, and a fire pit that looked like it hadn't seen flames in months. "I thought we'd keep it easy today," she said, settling into a chair. "Steaks, corn, drinks, just a backyard lunch. Nothing crazy." I sat down across from her. "Sounds perfect." There was a pause, not awkward, just the kind where you're both adjusting to new versions of someone you thought you already knew. "You do this a lot?" I asked. She looked at me. "Invite people from work over?" "No. First time." I laughed. "Didn't think so." She smiled into her coffee. "You're different. You helped me the other night without trying to win points or impress. That's rare." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Then she stood, stretched, and said, "All right. Let's fire up the grill." We spent the next hour prepping, me chopping vegetables, her seasoning steaks. The conversation flowed more freely now. She told me about growing up in Oregon, moving across the country for school, starting the company with her ex-husband. She mentioned the divorce, and how she eventually bought him out. "No kids?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "Didn't happen." By the time I started thinking about it, the marriage was already falling apart. Her tone wasn't bitter, just honest. She flipped the steaks, then steered the conversation away, asking about my life. I told her about growing up in this town, fixing up the house my dad left me, bouncing around different jobs before landing this one. "I've always liked people who know how to fix things," she said offhandedly, passing me a drink. We ate on the patio with food balanced on paper plates. No pressure. No awkward silences. Just two people under an overcast sky, sharing space. It was, somehow, one of the most peaceful afternoons I'd had in years. After lunch, she brought out a blanket and laid it on the grass. We stretched out side by side, drinks in hand, watching the slow drift of clouds. You ever think about leaving? She asked. Leaving? I echoed. This town. The job. Everything. I paused. Sometimes. But I wouldn't know where to go. I've built a life here, even if it's not flashy. She nodded slowly. Yeah. I get that. A long silence followed. Not heavy. Just thoughtful. Then she asked, "Want to stay for dinner?" I've got wine. And movies I never watch unless someone's here. I looked at her, trying to read what wasn't being said. But it wasn't romantic. Not in that moment. It was simply sincere. Yeah, I said. I'd like that. Later, inside, she changed into a cozy gray sweater and socks. She handed me a blanket, and we settled onto her couch, watching some 90s movie I hadn't seen in ages. At some point, her head gently rested on my shoulder. She didn't ask. I didn't move. And we didn't say much. It was quiet. Warm. Unexpected. By midnight, I stood to leave. She walked me to the door. Thanks for today, she said. You're welcome. She looked like she had more to say, but held it. I got into my truck, sat for a minute with the door cracked open, watching the soft glow of her porch light. She stood just inside the frame, arms folded, watching me go. I gave her a small wave and drove off, grinning like a fool the whole way home. I had no idea what this was becoming. But I knew it wasn't nothing. The next morning, I woke late, 9:30, which for me is basically sleeping in. The house was quiet, filled with soft light cutting through the blinds. I lay there, thinking about the day before. About her. About Evelyn. It had all felt so easy. So natural. She'd always seemed untouchable at work, sharp, composed, a little distant. But yesterday? She let the edges soften just enough to remind me she was human. Funny, too. In a way that hit deeper than I expected. I was halfway through making breakfast when my phone buzzed. A message. Evelyn. How about part 2 today? No expectations. Just company. I stared at the message and smiled. Then typed back. Me. I'll bring the coffee. Evelyn. 11? Me. Perfect. By 10:50, I was parked in her driveway again. 2 hot coffees balanced in a cardboard tray. She opened the door before I even knocked. This time, she wore a plain white t-shirt tucked into high-waisted jeans. Barefoot again. Her hair slightly damp like she just stepped out of the shower. Smells like you hit Main Street Cafe, she said with a grin. Guilty. We sat at her kitchen island, sipping in silence. Still warm. Still good. She glanced at me over the rim of her cup. I almost forgot what it's like to be around someone and not feel like I have to be anything. I didn't speak. I just nodded. Because I felt the same. Evelyn suggested we go for a drive. Nothing far. Just somewhere green, somewhere quiet. I offered to take the wheel, but she waved me off. You were the guest yesterday, she said. Today I'll drive. Her SUV was clean, understated, and comfortable. The music playing was soft and acoustic, just enough to fill the space without crowding it. We rolled the windows down, wind teasing her hair, and didn't say much. But the silence wasn't empty. It was understood. We ended up at a quiet park on the edge of town, the kind with a lake and a gravel walking path. A few families were scattered around, kids tossing bread to ducks, couple strolling lazily. But mostly, it was still. We walked slowly, side by side. She told me how she used to come here when things in her life were unraveling, her marriage, her business, her sense of self. It wasn't said for sympathy. Just shared, like reading a page from a well-worn book. I came out here just to breathe, she said. You seem stronger now, I replied. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I am. But strong doesn't fix lonely, Grant. We found a bench near the water. She slipped off her shoes and curled her legs beneath her. I leaned back, arms resting along the bench's edge. The clouds had thinned, letting sunlight filter through. The air smelled like earth and lake water. Do you ever regret not leaving? She asked after a while. You mean this town? The job? She nodded. Sometimes, I admitted. But I've always tried to make something work where I am, instead of chasing something that might not exist. Maybe that's playing it safe. Or maybe it's brave, she said softly. We sat in that silence for a while, just listening to the wind in the trees, a distant laugh from a child, water lapping at the shore. When we stood to leave, it felt too soon. On the way back, we stopped at a roadside stand. She insisted we pick up a jar of peach jam, calling it a non-negotiable weekend essential. I didn't even like peach jam, but I bought it anyway. Back at her place, we settled on the porch with one glass of wine each, just for the taste, not the effect. She made a simple dinner, pasta with pesto and toasted bread. I offered to help, but she waved me off. You did enough yesterday, she said. Tonight, just sit and talk to me. So I did. I told her about my dad teaching me how to fix things, about almost becoming a truck driver, and about losing my mom when I was 25. How I stopped chasing anything big after that. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, the kind of listening that makes you feel safe. After dinner, she pulled out a box of old DVDs. Pick something, she said. I held up Good Will Hunting. She smiled. Perfect. Halfway through, she drifted off, her head resting against my shoulder. I didn't move. Just sat there, letting her breathe, her warmth a quiet anchor. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a supporting character in someone else's story. I felt present. Like maybe I was stepping into the start of something real. The next morning was slow. No hangover, no fuzzy head. Just this calm, full feeling I hadn't known I needed. The kind that sneaks up on you. By almost 10, my phone was still quiet. I figured maybe Saturday was a one-time thing. A good day, but just that. Then at 10:14, a message came through. Evelyn. Sun's out. Fire pit's clean. You around? I grinned before I even meant to. Typed back. Me. Give me 20. Jeans. Flannel. Jacket. And, on a whim, I grabbed a half-open bag of marshmallows from the pantry. It just felt right. When I pulled into her driveway, she was already outside, raking a few stray leaves in the backyard. Her hair was in a messy bun, hoodie unzipped halfway. No makeup again. Just her. Hey, I called out. Morning, she replied, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Perfect timing. I just finished pretending I know how to do yard work. She waved me over. The fire pit was clean, logs stacked neatly, chairs arranged around it. 2 mugs sat on a side table, steam curling from one. Coffee strong, she said. You'll like it. We sat quietly, sipping and watching the sun slowly warm the yard. It was the kind of morning that made everything else feel distant. "I forgot how good this feels," she said. "Just being still. You don't get much of that?" I asked. She shook her head. "I thought I did. But silence alone feels different than silence with someone else around." She gestured gently at the scene. This is good silence." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. I understood. By noon, we were strolling the local farmer's market. She wore sunglasses and a beige coat, hair down. And for a while, it felt like we were just two people out on a quiet Sunday. No labels. No expectations. Just whatever this was becoming. We wandered past rows of apples, jars of honey, homemade candles, and fresh loaves of bread. She picked up a loaf of sourdough and a jar of tomato jam. "You ever try this?" she asked, holding the jar up. I shook my head. "It's awful," she grinned. "But somehow, weirdly addictive." I laughed. "All right, you're the expert." We moved through the rest of the market at a leisurely pace. A few people nodded at her in recognition, polite, distant. She stayed close to me, not touching, but close enough that it felt intentional. At one point, a pie vendor leaned across her table and said, "You two make a lovely couple." Evelyn offered a pleasant smile. I cleared my throat, caught off guard, but neither of us corrected her. Back at her place, we made simple open-faced sandwiches with what we picked up. We sat at the kitchen counter, sharing cold sodas and a half-eaten bag of chips. The conversation was light, easy, comfortable. After lunch, she disappeared for a few minutes and came back with a folded blanket and a battered old board game. "Game or nap?" she asked. "Dealer's choice." We ended up on the living room floor, legs crossed, playing a trivia game from the early 2000s. Most of the questions were outdated, and half the game pieces were missing. But it didn't matter. We played for over an hour, talking between turns, laughing when we both fumbled obvious answers. At one point, I caught myself watching her. Not in a romantic way, just noticing. The way she scrunched her nose when she couldn't recall a movie. How her fingers fidgeted with the edge of a card while I played my turn. Just small things. Real things. When the game ended, we lay back on the carpet. Late afternoon light streamed through the windows, soft and golden. She turned her head toward me. "This is the part where things get complicated, right?" I looked at her. "It doesn't have to be." She smiled, soft and thoughtful. "No, I guess it doesn't." After a moment, she sat up and stretched. "Come on. One more thing." We headed out to the backyard. She lit the fire pit, tossing in a few dry logs. The flame caught quickly, dancing against the early dusk. I pulled the marshmallows from my jacket pocket. She laughed. "You came prepared." "I figured you might be a marshmallow person." "I am," she said, grabbing one and poking it onto a skewer. We sat there until the sun dipped below the trees, roasting marshmallows and sipping warm cider she heated on the stove. The sky turned pink, then lavender, then indigo. She stood up, wrapped the blanket over her shoulders, and looked at me. "Want to stay for dinner again?" I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't want to assume. She caught the pause and said, "I mean, it kind of feels like you should." So I did. We made pasta again, this time garlic and olive oil. Nothing fancy. She put on soft jazz, and we talked about music, movies, and the bizarre things we believed as kids. When dinner was done, we settled onto the couch. This time, she leaned into me fully. No hesitation. Her head rested on my chest, her legs curled under her. We didn't kiss. We didn't need to. At one point, she whispered, "I can't remember the last time I had a weekend like this." I didn't know what to say. So I pulled the blanket tighter around her and said, "Me neither." And that was enough. We sat there for a long time, no TV, no phones. Just the ticking of a wall clock and the occasional creak of the floor. When I finally got up to leave, it was close to midnight again. She walked me to the door, just like the night before. This time, she didn't say thank you. She just looked at me and said, gently, "Let's not pretend this didn't happen." I nodded. Okay. And I meant it. Monday came too fast. After a weekend like that, reality hits different. I got up early, shaved, even ironed a shirt I usually wouldn't bother with. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to look put together. Professional. Like nothing had changed. But everything had. I pulled into the parking lot a little before 8. The building looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The fluorescent lights felt colder. The hum of the place felt sharper. Like I was stepping into something fragile, something I shouldn't break. The day began as usual. Phones ringing. Printers humming. That old coffee machine hissing away. I sat at my station, pretending to check emails. Really, I was waiting. At 8:12, I heard her heels. Evelyn walked through the glass doors, coffee in hand, hair up, blazer crisp, posture perfect. She looked exactly as she always did. The version of her from the weekend? Gone. Folded away behind the cool command she wore like armor. Our eyes met for half a second. She gave the smallest nod. That was it. No smile. No pause. Just the same subtle acknowledgement she gave every employee every Monday since I'd known her. I got it. We'd agreed, silently, to keep this private. And I was okay with that. At least I thought I was. The day crawled. I buried myself in service tickets and installations. I didn't see her again until just after lunch, when she passed through the tech bay to check on a new client setup. She spoke with a few people. Didn't glance in my direction once. At 5:01, I clocked out and walked to my truck. I sat with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even sad. Just unsure. Were we something? Or were we just two lonely people who shared a weekend and nothing more? That night, I didn't text her. She didn't text me either. Same thing Tuesday. Then Wednesday. By Thursday, I started to wonder if I'd imagined it all. Maybe I just wanted something to be there that wasn't. Maybe it was two quiet people finding comfort for a couple of days, something simple, temporary. Safe. Contained. But then Friday morning shifted everything. I was elbow deep in a client's router setup when a message popped up on my screen. Evelyn. You free at lunch? I stared at it. Typed yes. Deleted it. Waited. Typed it again. Sent. Her reply was instant. Evelyn. Conference room B, 12:15. At 12:13, I walked into the room. It was empty. I sat down, palms slightly damp. I tried not to expect anything. She walked in 2 minutes later. No laptop. No coffee. No notes. Just her. She sat across from me and let out a long breath, the kind you only release when you've been holding something in for too long. I've been overthinking this all week, she began, trying to figure out the right thing to say. I stayed quiet. Let her keep going. I liked being with you last weekend, she said. More than I expected to. And Monday came, and I didn't know how to act. I'd never done anything like that with anyone from work. She paused, looked down at her hands, then back at me. It scared me. Still does. Then she added, but I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. And I don't want to pretend it didn't matter. I nodded slowly. I don't either. Her eyes searched mine. I don't have a plan for this. I don't know what it's supposed to be. But I'd like to see you again. Not here. Not at work. Just out there. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Okay, I said. And that was it. That weekend, we met for dinner at a quiet little Italian place 2 towns over, somewhere no one knew who she was, and no one cared who I was. We talked. We laughed. She reached across the table to wipe a spot of marinara from my chin. And for the first time since I'd known her, she looked light. Not poised. Not precise. Just Evelyn. We started seeing each other regularly, slowly, carefully. We didn't hide it, but we didn't put it on display either. It felt like ours, and that made it sacred. The seasons changed. Spring to summer. Her hair got longer. She'd show up at my place with fresh groceries. I kept a toothbrush in her bathroom. At work, nothing changed. She stayed the boss. I stayed the tech. People whispered sometimes, offices in small towns always do, but we never gave them anything real to work with. And then one night, maybe 6 months later, I was crouched down tightening a loose leg on her coffee table. She stood in the kitchen, barefoot, pouring wine. I hate that table, she said with a little smirk. Want me to build you a new one? I asked. She looked at me, tilted her head, and said, simply, no. I want you to live here. I didn't say anything right away. Just kept turning the wrench. But when I finished, I stood, walked over, took the glass from her hand and said, okay. That was it. No grand gestures. No sweeping declarations. Just a quiet decision between 2 people who found something rare and decided to hold on. No drama. No games. Just a woman who needed help one Friday afternoon. And a man who said he'd do it for free.